Hey everyone, welcome to another episode from Ampro Engineering and proof that I need to invest in a wide angle lens. I have the camera so far back right now that the wire to my external mic won't reach, so I apologize if I sound a little weirder than usual, but I blame the TRX4. In this episode, we are going to take this bumper and remove them in favor of these. Let's get started. First things first, your bumpers should not come off that easily. I did unscrew these. We are going to replace them with these bumpers. Now they will come on a sprue, so we can just snip them off right there. Okay, there's our front bumper and our rear bumper. And you're going to want to get the flush cutter so that this little remnant is as smooth as possible, because that is going to potentially affect how it's going to seat itself on the mounts. Now I have unscrewed the front bumpers and they screw in from the back side here. So you have to take off this bracket in the front and at the back bumper, and there's just a little pin screw that goes in from the top. You'll notice that to install the replacement bumper is that hard. And at the rear, we will have the exact same difficulty, but please note that there's a little tiny notch right here, and that goes down. And that notch should clear the receiver hitch. And this is actually my first test fit, and it does clear the receiver hitch, so fantastic. Looking at the front of the bumper, you can see a couple of holes here, and these holes are designed to fit some auxiliary lamps. Given my limitations with how much room I had behind the bumper, because obviously the grill was here, the installation procedure I think is subpar, but it's the only thing I could think of. You're going to have to install a threaded rod in here, and this is just a 3mm hole, and stick it in about 3 or 4 millimeters and then glue it, at which point you'll simply drop the other side straight in, and again use a little bit of shoe glue and that'll hold it in place. It's not elegant, but it works. My other alternatives are not only weaker but more complex. Speaking of weakness, on the original bumper the screw went in from the back and threaded in place, but it is a machine screw, and my concern was if you were going to apply a load on the bumper, I didn't want it to yank the screw out. And thusly, it gave me a bit of a conundrum, because I wanted the screw to screw into a nut, which is why we've got this little nut shape over here. However, I didn't want that to be noticeable from the front, so what happens here is that we're going to put an eyelet in here, and these are available on eBay. I found some black ones because the bumpers are going to be painted black. Usually they're red, but I didn't want them to stand out nearly as much. They're very inexpensive, and this is what I've done at both the front and at the rear to cover the rigidly mounted nut and also give you that more scale appearance. Now, unfortunately, because of their size, Shapeways was not capable of having these polished, so you are going to have to do a little bit more work to get them cleaned up a bit. I'm going to use a black filler primer and do about 7 or 8 coats, and these are fairly light coats because I don't want it to run, of course, and then give it a nice light color sanding in the sink, and that will fill in the low spots and help shave down the high spots. Front and rear bumpers have been painted. I went ahead and shot it with a coat of low gloss black engine enamel. This is enamel I use on my cars, and I did the same with this one here. And the reason I used that particular paint is that it touches up beautifully. I'm going to drop an M3 nut. The reason for this is I wanted a secure method of mounting this to the truck. I didn't want it to be threaded into the plastic. So once you put that nut in there, and I will do it live for you here. Just kind of line that up, and you may need to clean out the hole a little bit, just depending on any sanding residue. And I will use a small Phillips screwdriver because this will center itself in the middle of the nut and just push it straight on down. If you do need to apply additional force to this, put something behind this and press directly onto this. Once that is in place, we need to cover it. And my method was to use these little eyelets that are found on eBay. They sell them in all kinds of configuration. They sell little hooks, they sell these eyelets, they sell a few other variants, one with a pin that drops down, and they all appear to be the same geometry. The center of all of these holes in both the vertical and the horizontal direction is 9mm, so anything that has that hole pattern will fit. Granted, the perimeter can't be too much larger than this. Because these are functional toe straps, what I did on the other side was make little indentations for nuts. The nut that you're going to use should come with the toe hooks or whatever hooks you want to put in, and they are standard M2 nuts. And I'm using these tweezers here. It seems to be the easiest way. So we'll hold the tweezer and just align it straight up with the shape of the nut. You can see it right there, straight in. And if it moves around, you can just kind of get the tweezers to help align it. And once it's gotten itself started like that, we can take our Phillips screwdriver again and push it in, just like that. I won't lie to you out there, I had some trouble doing that last one, so we'll put another one in. And you want to make sure that these little recessed areas are as clean as possible. Sometimes support material gets stuck inside these little corners, so you want to use a sharp instrument, whether it's a scalpel or an X-Acto knife like this, and just kind of clean them out. You can also use a small flathead screwdriver. And we'll just throw a few of these in here. Now that I've cleaned them, they go right in. Just like, there we go, just like that. That one's a little crooked, but I think I can align that with a flathead. And this top one seems to have gone all the way in. The texture that you're seeing on this side is only there because I didn't really sand this side. If I flip it over, you can see how much smoother it is. I could have gone further with the color sanding, but the thing is, I'm going to use this bumper, so it's going to get beat up. Now that those nuts are installed, we can drop the mount in place and drop in our screws. These screws seem to come in various lengths. I've purchased several different variations of these eyelets or hooks, and I've seen the screws range from 6 to 10 millimeters. So what you may have to do is cut down a couple of these screws, and I'll show you which ones. The inner ones protrude a little bit too much. Now, it's not going to prevent the car's factory mount from actually sitting on here, but you do want to make sure that the mount sits on this face and doesn't sit here, because it won't be pulled all the way up to the body. So you may need to trim some of the screws. That is installed, and on this model, we'll just put the hook on the front. On the rear, I wanted to point out that these screws sit a lot deeper, so you shouldn't have the same problem with having to trim these off, but just be aware of it. Now we can pull off the body. Pull this mount out, and of course I already removed the front bumper, the original one anyway, but you will need this part here. We will then take this bumper and make sure that you have it in the correct orientation. After you've trimmed down these screws, if there is any interference, you'll take this piece here and just press it in place like that. The screw that needs to go in here is a 14 millimeter screw, but if you don't have one, like I currently don't, you can either grind one down to 14 millimeters, or you can grab a couple of 0.5 millimeter washers and just drop it straight in here. Remember that you're going to have to drill these holes out to 3 millimeters, and it still might be a little bit snug, but once you've done that, it'll thread right into the nut and you're good to go. Front bumper is finished now and can be installed. And please make note of where these mounts had the pin screw. On mine, it was installed in the second one, and that's where I plan on reinstalling it. I did also install this winch, and I did that very easily by putting a 4 millimeter hole in the factory plastic bracket, and it just goes straight through the slot in the front. All right, I think now the front bumper is all set, and let's go to the back. At the rear again, you have the 2 pin screws. That'll take out this whole bulkhead, and then we'll take it, and the bumper is going to be in this orientation. The wider bars on top. Zip there and just push it in place. The rear will also require a 14 millimeter screw, and because I'm unprepared for this, we'll just put a couple washers on a 15 millimeter screw. And again, you want to make sure that these holes are fully cleaned out. Use a 3 millimeter drill bit. It goes in until it's snug. Put your pin screws back in, and there's your back bumper. Last, but actually least, is the installation of the front auxiliary lights. Again, I do not like how these lights are installed, but it was a case of going for the least worst option. Go ahead and take a M3 screw, thread it into the light bucket, I don't know, about 4 or 5 millimeters, depending on the light itself. And then you want to cut the head off, or in this case here, I just have some all thread. Once that is in, you'll apply a little bit of shoe glue and just apply some to the hole, drop it in, and just make sure that it cures straight. I really don't like how this is done. My fear was, had I split the bumper somehow and embedded something, or had a screw come in for the bottom so you just turn it, I felt that it would weaken the bumper. And this really isn't going to be a bad installation. It's just not a solid mechanical installation. These particular auxiliary lights will allow you to put in a 5 millimeter LED at the back. I think now it's time for the grand reveal. And there we have it. I really did want to have these black originally because usually when you see trucks of this vintage with these style of bumpers, they're painted black. Although I have seen chrome as well, but because I'm going to be using this truck as a trail truck, you know, the bumpers are going to see some damage. And really, I didn't want to damage the original bumpers because I love the look of the standard Bronco, hence the smaller tires. Now this bumper is designed to fit the Bronco without any interference issues. So you can see we have clearance here on the body, clearance on the front. The back bumper does not come into contact anywhere with the body. You can see it there. There's clearances everywhere. However, if you're running a particular tire that's, I don't know, a little bit too large, it is possible that the front tire may catch. This is the standard wheel and tire. And I just want to be very, very clear on this. You can see that it does fully compress without coming into contact with the front bumper. And if we do turn, you are going to get sufficient clearance. But again, if you have a much larger tire, you may have a problem with that. You may be wondering now about durability. That is a real concern. Although the nylon is not going to be as strong as aluminum or steel or stainless steel, the nylon is going to be flexible and durable. But if this truck does take a very hard fall, if you nosedive directly into a boulder or a rock with a good amount of momentum, again, this is a very, very heavy truck, you are probably going to break something. If you think that your driving style is too aggressive for these bumpers, then it probably is. I use this truck as a trail truck and not as a rock crawler. This is a good set for a trail truck and not something that you're going to abuse badly. By no means are these weak, but again, we're not talking about steel. Well, folks, that concludes this bumper installation, and I have to admit that when I first saw this Ford Bronco from Traxxas, my initial vision was a red interior, turbine wheels, and these bumpers. This is exactly how I envisioned the 1979 Ford Bronco. So I'm really excited to take this truck out now. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I hope you like these bumpers on this truck. I think they look nice and period correct, and they also have the proportions that I wanted. I've seen similar style bumpers that go much, much higher, and I don't believe that that is a correct look on this truck. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. I cannot wait to take this truck out and get some nice photos of it. We'll see you next time.